Hi, my name is Megan Avery and I teach people of all ages how to sew through my live video classes, recorded videos, my Learn to Sew blog, and at in-person retreats in the Catskills. You can find out about all of these things and so much more on my website, Hip Stitch Academy. I'm really happy that you're interested in taking kids hand sewing classes. Each week in this class, we're going to learn how to make a new project from start to finish. That's why the class is an hour and a half. The topics covered in this video will include keeping a neat and safe workspace for your at-home sewing class, scissor safety, and how to cut fabric properly. I'm going to talk about how you actually cut the patterns that we provide for each of the projects, pin and needle safety and the difference between pins and needles. I'm going to talk about how to work with embroidery floss and how to store it to keep it untangled, how to thread your needle using a very handy tool called a needle threader, and I'm going to walk you through the 3 main hand sewing stitches that we're going to use for the class. In case you don't know, the website is hipstitch.co and my email address is info@hipstitch.co. That's hipstitch.co. It's important to decide where your sewing workspace for the class is going to be, and then try to keep that space as neat and orderly as you possibly can. If you're working on a table, like I am here, try to clear away any of the other stuff that's on the table so you have a nice, free and clear space to work. If you're going to be working on the floor, try to find a spot that you're not going to be in the way of other people, and make sure that space is free and clear of other items besides your sewing tools. You don't want to accidentally cut something or sew something that you didn't mean to. When you're cutting with scissors, try to find a pair of scissors that fits your hand pretty well and is sharp enough to cut through fabric. When you're cutting, you want to make sure that your fingers are in the scissors properly. You want 3 or 4 fingers in this bigger spot on the scissors, and then your thumb goes into the other one so that you can cut easily. And then when you're not using the scissors, they should definitely be closed and out in the open. Don't bury them under other things. You always want to make sure that your scissors are visible, so if you're working on the floor, you don't step on them, or they're handy when you need them. If you have to walk with the scissors, just like in school, you're gonna, they teach you cover the blade as you're walking so that the handles are facing out in front, and never, ever, ever just like play around and cut the air, right? When you're cutting fabric, make sure that the scissors are resting on a flat surface, whether that's the table or the floor, it doesn't matter. You just want to be resting on a flat surface like this. You never want to be like holding something up in the air and cutting, because it's a lot harder to do and there's more risk of you maybe cutting your finger. So always have whatever you're cutting resting on the floor or the table. These are pins, and you can tell that they're pins because they have little balls on the top, and then the other end is sharp, but there's no holes in them like there would be on a needle. And then you have your needle, which you can see has a hole in one end, and then the other end is sharp. The hole is the end where the thread is going to go when you're ready to thread your needle, and then you're going to push the needle through with the sharp edge into the fabric. When you're not using a needle or a pin, it should go into something like this, like a pin cushion, or you could use a scrap of fabric that you have laying around. You could, take that and store your pins in it like this, so they're nice and flat and they're not going to poke anybody, okay? This is embroidery floss, and this is what we're going to be using for our thread in the kids hand sewing class. And I want to show you a quick and easy way to make sure that your floss doesn't get tangled while you're using it. So the first thing you want to do when it comes like this is slide the paper off gently, and then you'll see the floss comes in like this hoop, and it's really handy to just put it on your hand and then find the end of the thread that way, and then you can slowly and gently unwind as much thread as you need. And if you want to get really organized with it, you can then transfer the floss onto one of these, what they call embroidery bobbins. And there's actually a template that you can download and print your own. I printed it on cardstock, and then you want to cut one of these little things, and then that's how the thread starts to wind onto this little floss bobbin. So then you start winding it, and then you can go quickly around until the entire skein of floss is on your little embroidery bobbin. Now it's time to thread the needle. So I have my needle on this piece of felt. I'm just gonna take that out, and then I'm gonna unwind some thread, and I'm gonna unwind enough to thread my needle. And my rule of thumb is always around the length of your arm span. So if you were to hold up your arms like a bird and pretend that your arms were your wings, you're gonna take one end of the thread in one hand, and then the other end of the thread in the other, and you've got about the length that you need. So you want it to be about as long as your arm span. So that looks to be probably just about long enough. And then we're gonna cut that. And now you might have one of these, hopefully. It's called a needle threader, and it's really, really handy to thread your needle. So what we're gonna do is take the needle in your left hand, take the needle threader in your right hand, and you're gonna stick the wire of the needle threader into the hole of the needle. Okay, just stick that through. Then you're gonna find the end of the thread, and you don't really have to do anything to the end of the thread. And you're just gonna stick that into the wire of the needle threader. And you're gonna like pull it through, but not too far, just a little bit. I've only pulled it through about 2 inches. And then I'm going to hold the needle threader plastic, and I'm gonna hold the wire up here, and I'm gonna pull the needle threader out of the needle. And as I pull it out of the needle, it dragged the thread into the hole of the needle. So that's what we want. We want the needle to be threaded with this white thread. And then if your needle threader is still attached, you just want to slide that off and put it aside. And then I want you to gently, without making a knot, pull the ends of the thread through. So you want to make the 2 ends of the thread come together, and then you want the needle in the middle. So now you have a thread coming off each side, and your needle's in the middle. Now I've got my 2 ends. And the last thing we want to do is make sure that the end is knotted. So you literally just like put it in a little loop like this, tuck the ends through the loop, and pull. And then that makes the knot at the end of your thread. And if you don't want to have extra thread beyond your knot, you can go ahead and cut that. And now the knot is right at the end, and your needle is threaded and ready to sew. Now I am going to cut out the pattern. So each week the projects will come with a project pattern, and usually it'll show you what the project looks like and then have whatever pattern pieces go with it. I include some instructions, but you don't really need those if you're taking the class. So first off, again, keeping the paper on the table, I'm gonna slowly cut out this pattern piece, and then I'm going to cut out the other pattern piece. Doesn't have to be perfect. To cut the felt pieces out, we're going to pin the piece of the pattern paper to the felt, and then cut the felt to be the size of the pattern. And then you can remove the pattern pieces and pin the felt pieces together. So this is the first thing that we're going to sew, and I'm going to demonstrate the first stitch that we're going to use. I'm going to demonstrate the running stitch, and I'm going to do the running stitch around the entire edge of the strawberry leaf, and then that's going to attach it to the red strawberry part. So when you're starting to sew, you're actually going to come up from behind and carefully push the needle through. Make sure that your finger is not in the way, and then pull the thread all the way until you come to the knot, and then the knot will be behind your project. The next step is to put the pointy edge of the needle back down through the layers of felt, so it's coming out the back. And again, you're gonna pull until you come to the end and you can't go anymore, and you have your first stitch. You're going to move ahead slightly along the green edge, push the needle up, pull it all the way, and then making a stitch about the size of your pinky fingernail, go back down and pull. If your thread gets knotted like this, it's very common. Just try to, you could even use your needle to help you, but just try to get that little knot to come out and pull. Front to back, back to front. And then once you come back to the beginning, you can remove your pin. And then I still have some thread left, so I'm going to cut. I always want to cut it, leaving a little bit of thread so that I can take these two ends and tie them in a knot. So once you have the back of your project cut out, you're going to put the front and the back together and start by pinning them together. We're going to use the whip stitch, so make sure your needle and thread is ready to go. It has a knot at the end, and what you want to do to start is just go into the middle, because you're going to push your needle through only the top layer. So then we're going to pull it until it gets to the knot, and then what this does is it hides the knot in between your two layers of felt. And then on this stitch, the whip stitch, we're always going to start at the back and push through to the front. So my next stitch, I'm pushing up from the back and pulling, and then this is going to leave a little thread wrapped around the edge, and this is what's going to sew the front to the back. So that's why we use the whip stitch, the way it whips around the end of the project. So we're just going to keep going with the whip stitch all the way around the project. Okay, So it's a pretty simple stitch. We would go the rest of the way. And then with the whip stitch, when you're putting your front and back together, always leave a spot open so you can put your stuffing in and then sew it closed. Hopefully this video has shed some light on some hand sewing tips that will be useful to use in your first kids hand sewing class. We cannot wait to sew with you very soon. And if you'd like more information on our kids hand sewing classes and all of the online sewing classes that we teach, just head over to Hip Stitch Academy. It's www.hipstitch.co, and hopefully we'll see you in class soon.